25, being held live in the town council chambers. The meeting is being held in person. It can also be viewed on local cable channel 1303 or on the internet by accessing bucksportmaine.gov and selecting agendas and minutes and choosing this meeting and clicking on the video button next to the meeting. Questions or comments may be submitted prior to or during the meeting by emailing rich.rotella@bucksportmaine.gov or during the meeting by calling 307-8030. And Rich, if you do the roll call, please.
Yes, Tracy here.
Here.
Steve Bishop is not here. Counselor Rebs.
Here.
Dr. Tripp is not here. Dick Peterson.
Here.
Larry Wall.
Here.
Joe DeBonzo.
Here.
Ron Russell.
Here.
And John Paul Lalonde is not here. Back to
Okay.
you.
Okay, next on the agenda. Hope everyone has had a chance to read through the the minutes from last meeting. Can I,
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Second?
okay? All in favor? Very good, thank you. Okay, item number 3, recommendation regarding a TIF for Phase 2 Penquist project. Rich, if you could lead us into that, please.
Yes, and we do have Peter Malia from Penquist who is here this evening. The planning board has approved a 2-phase project for Penquist. Phase 1 is on hold. Phase 2 is actually gonna make Phase 1 a lot more obtainable, if that makes sense. So it's a 40 unit structure, and I'll have Peter come up and speak to the committee about the request and what's going on. And behind you, and for the folks at home, the touchscreen actually has the plans that were submitted to the planning board that were approved. And this is for Phase 2, the 40 unit building.
Well, good evening, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my ask. Currently, Penquist is asking for the town to consider a 75% tax abatement for a 30-year term for our project that we want to build on our 44 Middle Street Extension property. So there's 2 reasons why we are making this request. First, it will make the project more feasible. The lower our operational costs are for the building, the more debt service we are able to take on, the more debt we can take on to ultimately fund the construction of the building. So paying 25% of what the otherwise normal amount of taxes would be makes the project just more realistic that it actually happens. The second reason is that to fund this project, we are looking to apply for low-income housing tax credits administered by Maine Housing. Maine Housing provides, they have a rubric for how they grade all of the applications. It's a competitive process. And the maximum amount of points, the minimum amount of a tax abatement that we can get to get the maximum amount of points tied to the tax abatement is to receive that 75% tax abatement over a 30-year term. Just a little bit of more information about this project. The current hard costs are estimated to be around $15 million. The building will be a low-income housing tax credit site. So typically those are split between 60% AMI, area medium income units, and 50% area medium income units. We are also hoping to receive some Section 8 project-based vouchers for this property. We don't want it to be a huge portion of the building population. Possibly around 25-30% of the units hopefully will have Section 8 project-based vouchers tied to them. That, like a TIF agreement or a property tax abatement agreement, make the project more feasible in that they increase the amount of rental revenue we bring in, allowing us to take on more debt to actually fund the development. On the screen, we have, current buildings. Rich, can you zoom in on where the 2 new buildings are? Kind of in this area.
And you might want to describe it, Rich, for the, where it's located.
I'll go up in I'll scroll from here. Sorry. So if you folks aren't familiar with 44 Middle Street it's right up by Wilson Hall. That's the current Knox View Apartments. So if I just make this a little bit smaller for a quick second, just to, this is Wilson Hall. This is the Knox View Apartments. This road up here is Seminary Road, as detailed right there. And currently on Seminary Road, townhouses, is that what they're called?
Yeah, there's around
There's
14 or 16 townhouse units that vary between 3 and 4 bedrooms. I should know the exact amount offhand. It's either 14 or 16.
And phase 2 is known as the Penobscot Place 40
Yes.
unit
Yep.
structure. So this is a carry out of Seminary Road, correct, to get to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, right, we currently have planning board approval for the 40 units of senior housing that we're looking to receive low-income housing tax credits from the state of Maine to fund the construction of. When I say to fund the construction, the low-income housing tax credit is more or less the bedrock of affordable housing development right now. But to just give you an idea of what we deal with when we try to actually get these projects to work, what the low-income housing tax credit does is provide a subsidy of up to 70% of the development costs. So that leaves us with a 30% gap on how we fund the construction of these buildings. If we were to get a dollar per dollar capitalization of those tax credits, as a nonprofit, we don't have taxable income that we can leverage to, have offset by the actual tax credits. So we have to rely on what are called tax credit syndicators to enter into limited partnerships with us. And right now, the way that the market is for tax credits, we don't even receive 85 cents on the dollar per dollar of tax credit. So on top of that 30% gap, it's then widened by the fact that we don't actually capture the full allocation. So that leaves us with a very sizable gap on this project that I'm currently in the resource gathering phase of trying to figure out how we'll navigate, one of those resources being the TIF agreement with the town. So right now, again, we have planning board approval for Penobscot Place, the 40 units of senior housing, and Bucksport Village Apartments, which is 18 units of one-bedroom apartments as currently iterated. We were looking to get funding for the Bucksport Village Apartments through Maine Housing's Rural Housing Program. But this past funding round, we looked at the numbers, we looked at our construction costs on a project in Bucksport, and it just was not feasible. So we didn't even this past go round apply for funding through that program. We're really dealing with a lot of challenges in trying to develop affordable housing in this area of Maine. A big component is how low our rental revenues are compared to downstate developers. Rental revenue is a big piece to how these projects are ultimately funded because they allow us to take on the debt that we need to close those gaps left by the tax credit program. So for Bucksport Village, we didn't even submit an application this past go around, but one thing that Penobscot Place will allow us to do is bring down some of the development costs that made Bucksport Village not feasible. Because a big component of that Bucksport Village development budget was ultimately this roadway and a lot of this parking. You can see on this map, the parking for phase 2 versus just the parking for the Bucksport Village Apartments. To build that building, we have to do a lot of the work that we would have to do to build this building. So in facilitating us to get the funding and enough resources necessary to develop Penobscot Place, we're also looking at making those 18 additional units substantially more feasible.
You're following FMR for your rents, I assume, or close to FMR?
So I looked up the rental information before coming down. So for the project-based vouchers, we would receive the fair market rents. I did not jot down what those are. But keep in mind, an individual who is receiving the project-based voucher, while we're getting the fair market rent for their apartment, they're only paying 30% of their income, typically 30% of their income towards their rent.
Right.
For the non-Section 8 units, they'll be split between 50% AMI units, area medium income, and 60% AMI units. And to give you an idea of what those numbers are, so keep in mind, they're gonna be one-bedroom senior apartments. So some will be occupied by single-member households, some will be occupied by two-member households. for a 50% AMI unit, if it's gonna be occupied by a one-member household, the income limit is $31,000. For a two-member household, the 50% AMI limit is $35,000 of annual income. And for the 60% units, for a one-member household, it's $37,000. And for a two-member household, it's $42,000. Individuals who don't have vouchers living in the 50% units will pay $828 per month in rent. And individuals in the 60% units will be paying $994 per month in rent. Caveat being, those numbers are updated every April 1st. This project is definitely not going to get built by April 1st. So I don't know what those numbers will look like. HUD has a system of how they update those income thresholds and limits.
Question for you.
Sure.
I believe at one time, weren't you looking at workforce and not section 8?
Yes.
And that's how it was presented to the planning board, wasn't it?
The 18 units,
Yeah.
yes. So the main rural housing program
Uh-huh.
goes off of 80% AMI versus the 50 and 60%. Workforce housing doesn't have like a definitive definition, right? Like there's no,
Yes,
Like
but
regulation.
I'll tell you right off what my concern is. Low-income housing, I mean, we have some low-income housing. I am concerned because we know that brings in, history tells us that brings in more public safety issues, things like that. And I'd like to hear how that's being addressed. Perhaps the council has some ideas, because you're gonna be putting a whole mess of new people up in that area. And I'm concerned about that.
Absolutely. So Maine housing mandates that any low-income housing tax credit development provides the tenants with resource service coordinators. And in our two most recent tax credit developments in Bangor, which are more or less rubber stamp copies of Penobscot Place, although one's only 39 units, so 79 units of total housing. The vast majority of the tenants in those buildings utilize the resource service coordinators in a way that is reported to improve their financial well-being along with their mental and physical health well-being. I did some digging into the community demands of those 79 units. So for those 79 units, I reached out to Penobscot County Dispatch, and they reported less than 4 911 calls per month for those 79 units. That's just 911 calls, so there could have been non-emergency calls, but still, I think that is a very reasonable amount of 911 calls for that population. Additionally, I checked with our property manager. We don't manage our own properties. We rely on the Housing Foundation out of Orono. There are currently no recipients of general assistance in those apartment buildings. I think I called her at a fortuitous time. I don't want this to be presented as me saying there will be no recipients of general assistance in that building. But functionally, there are reasons why there's a low amount of general assistance recipients in tax credit buildings. One of which is the rent. Tenants in those buildings have to have enough income where they're not paying more than 42% of their income towards the rents. So functionally, you're not going to have too many general assistance recipients living in a tax credit building.
I think additionally, some of the workforce probably fit into Section 8 eligibility.
Yeah, it's just the
Absolutely.
way it was presented and now how it's being presented.
Yeah.
One other question, the other unit that right now you can't get funding for, wasn't that supposed to be like 55 and over?
So Penobscot Place will be 55 and older, the 40 units.
So I'm just looking now at the mix that could be going in. I have no issue with people trying to find a place. I'm just,
No, you want the details, I completely understand. The 18-unit building, there was no regulatory requirement for it to be 55 and older like there will be with Penobscot Place. I think some of the planning board information may have said 55 and older. Maine Housing has changed how they score applications for that program in a way that may make us want to take a step back on how it's currently iterated. They put a big preference in for multi-bedroom units, figuring that this would be a good tool to create workforce family housing. So as currently iterated, it's 18 one-bedroom units. I don't believe that there is a firm requirement for it to be 55 and older. But at the same time, we're looking at the RFP, and we don't know what the next main housing RFP for that program will be. We don't even know if they'll have funding for that program, to be honest. I do think we might want to take a step back and revisit what that building looks like relative to what the community needs are and relative to what's going to score well on that specific RFP.
Just a question, so there's gonna be a total of 58 units being built, is what you're saying there,
Currently, we have the 58 units approved by the planning board.
okay? So this is not, since it's not really gonna be just where it's totally section 8, so it's not Bangor trying to take their homeless and shift them down here.
No, it's going to be difficult for a homeless household to access apartments in either building, be them from Bangor or any community, simply because of the income requirements to afford these apartments.
And homeless folks they use another voucher system called STEP, which is not Section 8, it's a different program.
So for the next 30 years though, for the sewer and for the water usage and all that, the town's taxes would be, the townspeople would be chipping in on that, on taxes, on their taxes,
Well, we're just asking for an abatement to the property taxes
but for 30 years.
for 30 years, correct? Now, one of the big reasons why we like doing the 30-year abatement agreements, on top of the fact that they make the project score better and be more financially feasible, is that it solidifies our requirement to pay taxes, if that makes sense. That building, Penobscot Place, will be owned by a limited partnership that is not exempt from property tax. What happens with low-income housing tax credit projects is after 15 years, the tax credit investor exits the partnership, and in the case of a nonprofit affordable housing developer, the nonprofit takes typically, ideally, something goes wrong if this doesn't happen, the nonprofit developer takes 100% of the building equity and is then potentially tax exempt from property taxes altogether. The 30-year TIF agreement would require us to continue to pay taxes regardless of the tax exemption status.
Question? A few questions. I've been listening over here. First off, this building here, the larger one,
Yes.
that's gonna be multi-story,
It will be 3 stories.
3 stories, okay. And the 55 units, that'll be at Penobscot Place?
40 units at Penobscot Place for 55-year-old households or older.
Then in coming forward, looking for the 75% tax abatement agreement for 30 years, what's the current arrangement for the townhouses and Knoxview apartments?
Those are currently determined to be tax exempt by the tax assessor. We would like to enter into a pilot, but as of now, those buildings, well, last I checked, those buildings really do not have the cash flow necessary to support
Okay,
anything. We've been putting a lot of money into deferred maintenance. We're targeting to have the CDBG money that we're receiving through the town help with that situation, with the intent being that we can enter into a pilot agreement at some point.
so the total of 55 units, how many people do you envision?
So
I mean, total,
Right.
just a ballpark number.
Well, the 40 units of tax credit, Penobscot Place, that would have been a really good detail for me to ask our property manager how those households in our similar buildings in Bangor break down. At most, it would obviously be 80 people, at least 40 people.
Okay,
I don't know what the trends are as far as how many are 2-member households versus 1-member household.
yeah,
The 18 units would be a similar situation where, because it was all 1-bedroom units, we really wouldn't want anybody with more than 2 household
Okay.
members. But again, with that one, based on the funding mechanism that we were looking to rely on, I do think there might be a need to take a step back and look at the overall project, looking at the community needs along with the main housing RFP rubric.
And along with what Richard was saying about public safety issues, do you ever do anything like for, there will be a requirement for, potential requirement for police, EMS, fire services and all that. On the fire side, does Pinquist ever do anything like have a $110 fee a year per capita, you know, something like that to help offset the service requirements at a location?
Like levied on the tenants or?
Well, if we've got 40 units, we'll say for fire and EMS, just for round numbers, say fire and EMS service would be $150 a year to cover that per unit. Do they ever do anything?
I don't believe there's any assets in our portfolio that we have any sort of arrangement like that with any local municipality.
Okay.
We are looking to pay 25% of the taxes for a $15 million building though.
How many do you have out there at 30 years?
I don't know offhand our older
That seems a little high to
assets.
me. Usually they're like 15 or 20. Of course, you know, Rich would know better.
I-
than that.
The Bucksport does not score well in these grants. There are 3 categories where you can get 10 points, 8 points, and 4 points for being a certain municipality. Bucksport doesn't qualify for it that way, so Panquist automatically starts off at 0 points on their application because they're doing the project in Bucksport. So the next stage you look at is where can we make up points versus the next project? And the scoring goes 1, 2, or 3, and the only way to get a 3 in the next section is to do a 30-year, 75% TIF.
Okay. Yeah,
I will say the most recent TIF agreement, I don't know categorically all of our TIF agreements that exist with all the towns and cities that we've developed housing in. The most recent TIF that we've received was for a project in Bangor that has, for a variety of technical reasons, stalled out. For that project, we did receive a 30-year, 75% TIF from the city of Bangor.
I think Ron's been trying to ask a question for a while.
Yeah, so I mean, I know the housing's needed desperately, but last fall, I campaigned around town, and not in the big main building, but in the townhouses. I went up there and pretty much went to all of them, and there were a lot vacant. There were a lot in disrepair, pretty severe disrepair. And my question would be, how along in their cycle are those townhouses?
That's an interesting question. So what you see with housing now and when those townhouses were built is you think about like a building life cycle. And what we see with like especially with the tax credit program, like the first stepstone is that year 15 where the tax credit investor shifts out. And then the nonprofit, if it's a nonprofit developed affordable housing project, the nonprofit typically becomes the sole owner. Then at year 30, you oftentimes do see some sort of major recapitalization. So sometimes you see affordable housing owners use tax credits or tax exempt bond financing to be able to gather a very large amount of capital to put into a existing building. Both the seminary and the townhouse units are at the point where they need recapitalization. We did, with the town, apply for and win $500,000 from Maine ECD. That we're looking to, one of the components of that project, we're looking to take those units that really are not up to our standards. Panquist as an affordable housing developer and housing provider, we're looking to make significant repairs to those units to bring them up to our standards. When we purchased those buildings, there was a substantial amount of deferred maintenance. We've poked away at a decent amount of it. But we're looking to get that $500,000 in, which is really on our piece right now. Rich has been really great as far as facilitating that process. It's really been stalled out on our side. The capital is definitely needed for those apartment
Right,
buildings.
what I worry about is the life cycle is stretched out and they're done, bare bones, kind of, you've sat here and told us for half an hour about how money's tight all along the way and we can't do this, we have to push that off. And I think, and I actually went to all the housing units. I mean, the big one is no soliciting, so those you don't really go in, but I also did some constituent work up there when I was in the legislature. And those in particular were pretty shocking to me. And I worry when I hear about these projects that where everything's controlled when they're new and it probably works pretty good, but there's not much of an effort down the road to see that these stay. I mean, every house needs
Right,
upkeep.
absolutely. Well,
But it doesn't seem to me like that's in the plan.
so 2 points. If you would like a tour of the seminary building, we can absolutely arrange for you to get in and see what we're dealing with on the maintenance side on that building, what we've already accomplished on the maintenance side of that building. That's something we can definitely arrange if you are curious what the inside of that building looks like. But on the second point, those buildings are what we refer to in the affordable housing world as NOAHs, naturally occurring affordable housing. They're not regulated in the same way that this building will be regulated by the state of Maine. It's either a 30 or 45-year use restriction. I want to say 45 use restriction applied on our tax credit developments by the state of Maine, tied to some deferred payment, zero interest financing that we get that facilitates the development of these buildings, that gives Maine Housing basically the ability to say, your project meets these standards for quality, or we take it from you.
So are you saying, because I am familiar with sort of what goes on in some of the others when, there's certain requirements that they have to come in. You're saying that in those particular townhouses, there is none of that?
There is no
So
existing,
it falls back on the owner?
yes, and
Were those section 515 originally?
I believe they weren't section 515. They were HUD financed, HUD 200 something. It was back in the 1970s. It's not a mechanism that's currently available for creating new housing.
I only mention that because a lot of the section 515 ones are maturing in like 8
Right,
years, and we're
right,
about to
it's
lose
a
all of
problem.
that natural housing. I
Well-
wasn't sure if it was the same.
But some places, they've gone on to market rate housing and, only because they need that extra rent to
Right.
fix the buildings back up.
And that's
And-
something that we don't want to make them market rate. We want to meet our mission. As far on the housing vertical, Penquist's mission is to develop and preserve low and moderate income housing.
And I think that's laudable, but is it realistic in the world to, I mean, if you go into a large city now, it's pretty much when a building goes up, it's gotta have mixed housing. And ultimately, maybe, is that not maybe a better way to have a mix where you're putting all kinds of different housing together so that the world isn't segregated by,
We have entertained with the townhouse units what a more moderate income look would be. Question is, what is the bound of moderate? You look at some of the resources out there. USDA RD 538 financing, I think, goes up to 120% AMI, so long as the average is 100% AMI. We're trying to figure out where we want to actually take those townhouse units, keeping in mind we really don't want to displace anybody, and we do know that there is a need for the family housing to be low income. So we're still trying to figure it out. On top of, with the CDBG funding, that does place some restrictive covenants on how we what pricing we set those units at moving
But
forward.
it's almost like a model in nursing homes, you know, you have main care, and that's the problem in nursing homes now, is because it used to be there was private pay and main care balance, and there's no balance anymore.
If Bucksport, I don't believe Bucksport could sustain 40 units of market housing. I think the need is, because like a one-bedroom FMR is about 1,300 a month.
Right, I'm not
So
talking
that's-
about 40 units
Oh,
of
okay.
that, I'm talking about, they've got a, you know, section in the middle that's not great. And maybe that's the mix that helps build up, it's sort of the same idea, the 40 units first and then the other units, because you got infrastructure costs.
Right.
We already got buildings there, so, you know, if that, look at that as an uplift to, I'm just saying,
It's,
Well,
no, it's-
potentially, where will the tenants arrive from? Are you focused on like Penobscot and Hancock County, or could they come from all over the state, or?
We're not allowed to put any sort of like residency restrictions on applicants moving in to the apartments. We have had market studies done. We had a market study done to look at the feasibility of these two projects. And it does show that there is a local demand for housing at and below the 80% AMI level. I would anticipate the majority of the units being occupied by Hancock County residents.
When would you actually put a shovel in the ground to begin, if the phase of the moon and everything lines up?
Yeah, so we would be looking to apply for the tax credits from main housing in July. We would find out if we receive an allocation sometime during the fall. Once we do that, there's several, we go back and forth. You know, we have our pricing with 50% drawings right now to get to that $15 million amount. When we actually do get credits allocated, we have our architect and engineer look more closely at it and get us a more developed pricing. That takes several months. It's unlikely that we would be able to break ground at the start of the 2026 construction season. And you don't have to break ground at the start of the construction season, but with the way that construction loan financing works, once you get a little too deep into the construction season, you really kind of do want to wait till the next one starts. I think an optimistic groundbreaking date would be April of 2027.
Before you, no, it's not, okay. So, you said now you're gonna open it up to section 8, and is there a formula that you have on how many could be section 8 versus regular income, full income? I mean, I'm just trying to get a better understanding of
understand.
where you're trying to drive this.
Right.
Because you build it, they will come.
Right. So we are interested in trying to receive a project-based voucher allocation somewhere in the 8 to 10 voucher range. So around up to 25, maybe a little bit more, maybe 30% of the building. We are cognizant of the community needs, and we don't want to do a full Section 8 building.
10 to 12 units.
Somewhere in that ballpark, maybe as little as 8.
Is there a limit, though? In other words, right now, you could do 100% under your current, anything goes.
Well, so what we can't control is housing choice voucher participants using their housing vouchers to move into the 50 and 60% units. But as far as the project-based vouchers, we're very cognizant with the community needs.
Yep.
We're not looking to go more than that 10, 12
And the
amount.
55 and over, really, you don't have approval, and I think if I heard you correctly, you haven't moved forward with it, given the situation you're currently in.
So we do have planning board approval for the 18 units.
I understand
But I
that.
would like to take a step back, possibly looking at community needs and the current RFP for that program. The 40 unit of 55 plus and older, we also do have planning board approval for right now.
Yeah, that's,
Right. It's really about, I would describe myself as being in the resource gathering phase to be able to put together a strong, feasible application to main housing.
see, I'd like to see that one done first myself.
The 40 units,
Oh, yeah, the
It's-
55 and over.
right? I
I
mean,
think there's a big need.
there absolutely is a big need. it's likely gonna be the first one that happens. You know, I can't say for certain, right? It might be that we don't get allocated tax credits this application season, and then the RFP for the 18-unit program comes out, and we can get that one going first. But right now, we are a step ahead on the 40-unit front than the 18-unit front.
Maybe I got myself mixed up. The 18 unit is the 55 and over.
So the 40
We talked
unit-
about this as well.
Yeah, I wanna
When
make
you,
sure.
cause you
I'm-
were on the planning board and I was
Yeah.
here for both meetings and
And
I thought the
that's
same
why I'm
thing,
trying
yeah.
I'm trying to get back into the swing of that. I'm not on the planning board anymore, so I'm trying to get back into the swing of what we approved at the time and how we approved it.
Right.
And so that's what's on my plate at the moment, is remembering all the different things. And of course, we do need affordable housing. We need 55 and older. There's no doubt about that. It's just again, I get very concerned when the plans change and just history tells me that it may not be a good fit.
Well, the 40 unit hasn't substantially changed. It's just that when we got planning board approval, we applied for tax exempt bond financing for main housing, and the numbers just didn't work.
So, just to clarify, we pay 25% of the taxes on the mill rate on the 15 mil.
Yes.
So did you figure out how much that is?
So I don't know how your tax assessor will assess the $15 million building or what your mill rate is.
So we don't know then how much may or may not fall on the taxpayers in the town to make up the difference for services, needs, water, sewer, or anything else. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Are those typically fixed when you do TIFs? I'm a bit naive to that piece. Do they fix a mill rate at inception of agreement,
No,
or does
it
the mill rate
is-
fluctuate with the mill rate?
Your tax
generally?
assessor says the assessment on the property is 15 million, and then with the mill rate, we pay whatever amount that would be. And the tax abatement is then that last
Whatever
step.
the mill rate is,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Lawyers get involved on both sides, draw up, cause there's state of Maine agreements. Once the TIF is, once the TIF is created between the town and Penquis, it obviously comes to the town council, but that's not the final step. The state of Maine also has to agree on that as well. And then it goes from there. So the last one we did was for the project that hasn't happened, so you don't realize that TIF until there's improvements, right, to the site. So like there was never, the TIF has never actually started down the road.
Yeah.
So if this doesn't start to 2027, if this committee's simply giving a recommendation to the council, and whatever the recommendation is, the council is still gonna take this up Thursday night. So they will take your recommendation in either direction under advisement, but to his point that if it starts in April 2027, but the agreement comes on hand, well, just for sake of easement, April 2025, it actually technically doesn't start the window until April 2027, when they put that first shovel in the ground and start building and getting things going, right? And I shouldn't just say shovel, I mean, they've gotta be starting the building.
And does the 30 years stop from that stage or this stage?
I believe it'd be from that
As a
stage.
construction phase, yeah, once there's the improvement, because they'll be assessed the land value and then they'll be assessed the building value, and the building is where the
Of
tax
course.
is coming in.
Of course. Sorry, yeah.
No, that's okay,
Yeah.
it's, we don't deal with these often.
Question for you. Is there a chance you'd come back and make the project smaller if things are not working out?
Yes, but we do really wanna be at 40 units for our tax credit developments, because what we have found with our existing portfolio is that it's really the break even for long-term operating costs relative to maintaining the sites. With our smaller projects in our current portfolio, we really do struggle financially when you look at continued maintenance relative to the amount of rental revenue being received. It's a magnitude of scale, right?
Yeah, no, I understand.
You know, if you do 2 floors, with one roof or 3 floors with one roof, that roof covers the same amount of square footage.
Well, I think Ron brought up some good points about the other locations and what that would do to that property value up there as well. Because if it's deteriorating down below and they're not being really fixed up to the fullest amount, am I understanding that correctly?
We're not satisfied with the conditions of those townhouse units by any means. It does not meet our standards. We are looking to pump capital into it.
But by keeping them depressed, then the overall value of the new unit would also be somewhat depressed. I mean, one has to ask the question.
So what's found with tax credit development is, and this has actually been like really studied by economists. When a tax credit development gets built, it actually causes the property value of surrounding properties to increase. We're tax exempt on those townhouse units right now. We need to bring those up to a higher quality though. They do not meet our current standards.
According to Ron, they don't come even close.
Those townhouses are not owned or managed by Penquist.
They are owned by Penquist through our nonprofit affordable housing subsidiary, Penquist Development, Inc. They are currently managed by Statewide Property Management.
So what's the financial stability of Penquist? They're winning the ones up in Bangor, that whole section, and here, and I mean, the long run over 30 years, if Penquist disappeared, then what happened? Just a concept, just wondering.
You know,
I know,
Penquist
it's
is
a terrible question.
No, I mean, I think it's a very valid question. So, Maine Housing will have, through the financing they provide, some control over what happens to any of our tax credit developments, be it that, you know, if Penquist were to completely dissolve or just be in the capacity, a financial capacity where it can't maintain its properties. We've actually have purchased properties where the initial developer reached that point where Maine Housing had to basically tell them, listen, we're shifting the property to somebody else. And based upon where those projects were located, you know, it was facilitated that Penquist would be the entity to take it over.
Is that like lien enforcement or something? Or?
Well, they will have a restrictive covenant on the deed.
We have, we're getting time short, and we have people waiting in the audience to come up and on a different subject. So tonight, we're looking for
Either a recommendation to recommend to the council to approve the request of a 75% TIF over 30 years, or a denial. A 3-3 tie is a denial. It's gotta be a majority.
Okay.
So, and that's in either way, it's gonna depend on how your motion is worded.
okay,
And it's a recommendation, it's not an answer that only the council
It's
can
not
make that.
binding. If we say no, it still goes before the council.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, the council's gonna have to ask more questions.
Yeah,
And I'm sure they will, and they're the ones with some knowledge here, okay, and knowledge over there, so.
so this evening, unless there's some other detail that this gentleman, I'd like to put forward a recommendation to go forward and bring this up to the town council this coming Thursday meeting. And the planning board, my understand, has already given approval, otherwise they wouldn't be at this phase.
They have granted approval for phase 1 and phase 2 of the project, yes.
Okay.
They don't know about the TIF and they're not involved in the TIF, but yes, phase 1 and phase 2 have been approved.
Okay, so can someone make a recommendation for a vote? And as Rich stated, if it ends up 3-3, that is a rejection.
I'll make a recommendation to forward it to council for discussion. Oh, the recommendation, I make, oh,
You gotta recommend
You either
the
gotta
tax
recommend-
abatement.
I recommend the tax abatement discussion move to council
For approval?
for discussion.
For discussion, okay.
Okay.
So for discussion only.
Or I get, if all right, I'll reword that. I recommend that the tax abatement request be moved to council for approval.
I would second that.
So, all those in favor? Opposed?
Okay, so the recommendation is going to go to the council that this committee recommend that they look at approving that. So we will need you here Thursday. Meeting's at 7 o'clock, and the same information you provided to me today is ready for the council on Thursday.
All right, sounds good. Thank you all for your time and have good evenings.
Thank you, Peter.
for all that you gave us.
Yes.
Really appreciate it.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, sorry to be moving things along here, but the recommendation regarding the EDC funding for the following groups, and first up is Friends of Fort Knox.
And you have in your packets the applications, and Dean is great. He's asking for funds for three different, and he did three different applications for you, so you could follow along how each part of those work as well. And it's the same funding request as last year.
Previous year, yeah. So those of you that, thank you for having me tonight, and I don't know which one you're looking at first, but if you remember from previous years, the fireworks money that we're requesting is not really our money. I never touch the money. Friends of Fort Knox lights fireworks off. I facilitate getting all the permits and things. We've already got those contracts already working up in shape for the Bucksport Bay Festival. That's $5,000. I think there's 140,
160.
that's 160, thank you. 160 is because we do 2 fireworks displays. The 5,000 is actually for the Festival of Lights in December. That's what I'm here to request funding for, but again, I'm not going to touch that money. It's more about Bucksport being able to have their Festival of Lights with a fireworks display in December over there. The other fireworks already is in the books, I guess that's what I was talking about, is the contract's already moving forward for the Bucksport Bay Festival, which is in July. So there's 2 fireworks displays. One, the December one, is the one that I'm asking for funding for. And then I'm asking for $160 because I've got 2 employees, myself included sometimes, that have to stay there for a certain amount of hours times $16, $20. I forget what the rate was I was asking for, but it's more. We do more than that. We clean up afterwards and stuff. It's just part of the helping me to not incur additional cost as we light off the fireworks for the displays. So that's the first one. The display 5,160 is labor plus December's fireworks show cost. I'm gonna go to the next one, the easy one, is $500. This one, since I've been here, this is my 8th year, I think, going on, and $500 for that bridge, have lighting on it. It's an agreement, and I'm not even sure how deep you want me to go this time. They're actually putting, they put LED lights, and they're doing a survey. They're monitoring the costs, and so they said, here's the deal. The town of Bucksport, some 15, 17 years ago, wanted those lights on. Friends of Fort Knox wanted those lights on from May through October and 2 weeks in December. The DOT said, no, we don't want it in May, we don't want it in October, and we don't want it in December. We want to only do it in the summer months. If you guys want to do this, then you're going to have some earnest money put towards this, and they came up with $500. It's way more than $500 for that time that you're getting. The state of Maine said, if you're going to make us go through these hoops, we'll do that. Those costs were much more when they were incandescent. For changing a bulb was $1,000 each time one of those burnt out. Now they're LEDs, they're expected to last much longer, but that was part of $1 million project. Not that the lights cost $1 million, but that was part of $1 million project. And now they're not seeking to collect those funds. They're just wanting to have your partnership, and it'll probably stay around $500 just for the trouble of trying to codify it in some other agreement. So we're just going on the same kind of, I don't know if it's a word of mouth agreement, but it's been part of the, if you guys change your mind, you're like, no, we don't care whether the lights stay on at all, ever, for this amount of time, then I was talking to Sue about that last year. She's like, well, what if they turned it off at 10 p.m.? What if we only did half of May? And so we're getting into this negotiation thing, and that's where he was kind of like, seriously, $500, it's not worth the amount of
Spending
trouble.
500 to
to resist.
negotiate.
Yeah, so if you are happy with that, what I am is a pass-through, as I understand this, I take the $500 as a nonprofit from the municipality, I give it to the DOT because I already have a working relationship with the Department of Transportation, so that's my role, I don't touch the money, it's just a pass-through to get lighted around the time.
Poor Dean doesn't touch any of them.
I do have a question, Dean, about
sir.
the fort lights.
Yeah.
Kevin talked about those passionately, about how they were in the ground and they were bad, and you were replacing some yourself. Where do those stand?
So there's, what he's referring to is the metal halide lights, there's 28 lamps that lit the front of the fort. Now all you see is the two stanchions of 3 LEDs that do the splash on the interlockment. There's only 2 working lights of the metal halide in the ground facade lighting. It was going to, I get a quote,
You
when I
told
sought
us.
funds, it was ridiculous, he said $160,000. And I said, I can do it myself for $6,000, I'm pretty sure. No, I was kidding, but I'm not allowed to do that, I can't dig in the ground, I can't rip out the existing system, it's a lot more complicated. And then he wanted these turning
Code
colors and,
enforcement's right behind you.
who is? Oh, yeah, very good.
Good answer.
That's right. No, I cannot touch it. Actually, he said interestingly, that is all under, it's not under your purview, it's under DEP.
Land Water
Super.
Conservation Fund.
Because we've received those funds, it's also under that, but it's outside of the local.
Because it's under
enforcement.
state.
Because it's state, exactly. And it's actually under different rules because we're grandfathered because it's been there since, what?
So
before.
basically, bad idea, they don't
No.
work. And
They don't, well, I got permissions to do it, but they said you have to put them in exactly the same space, and they don't work well. I can move them backwards, and then they're above ground, and then people are gonna mess with them. So what I decided to do, I've actually got $4,000 still from Bucksport, from previous ask. I'm still holding on to that, and what I'm going to do with that is use it towards the festival lights and getting some splash lights that you plop them in the ground, you light them up, and you pick them up again, you put them away for the evening. So I'm going to use the funds in a way that's desirable for whatever the town of Bucksport wants, because that's what I was given the money to do with. But they're not going to replace, because the town of Bucksport also said, I don't care if the fort's lit up, I want the bridge lit up. Have you heard this? Why are we lighting up the fort? Do you know?
It looks nice.
It does, but what's the effectiveness of it? Who's seeing it? And it's after hours, we're
Well, I
closed.
see it.
You can see it, but it's lit up enough with a splash. And that's what we saw, was the down below, those LED lights are working well enough to be able to, and we've had people telling us to turn them off. Yes, why? Because the Dark Skies Initiative.
Yep.
Is it a navigationable thing? No, it's not preventing people from running into it or anything. It's enough sufficient that it does light up, but it doesn't bleach out the bridge, which is again also the iconic. And so getting any more of this, it was a good idea, but all I was doing is trying to replace something that somebody came up with 15 years ago. And the motivation to do it is not, it's not as much as the bridge.
sounds like the 4,000 will last for a while.
4,000 will last for a while.
Bouncing them around, so
That's correct.
Sounds like a good plan.
So $500 for the DOT. Last one.
Last piece.
Sorry. The last one is, last year, I was kind of surprised a little bit. Rich and I went into a campaign, advertising campaign. I'm willing to do that again. This money that I'm asking for is advertising dollars. It's the same amount that I got last year. And I still have 1,500 of those dollars from last year to be able to use in the front side of spring as we move forward. This will be used in that same period of time from today forward, if you will. And what I'm gonna tell you is what I do, is I put the words Bucksport someplace in there. Don't forget to stop by Bucksport, shop in Bucksport, just across the river from Bucksport. And so I'm going to.
I've seen your ads, yes.
Okay, very good. I use that money to try to promote Bucksport if it's
Yes.
your dollars. And that's, so that's the 3 asks.
So, in total, we're $9,000.
Yes, sir.
Can I have
Make a motion to approve all 3.
A second.
like to have a vote? Those that approve?
Ah.
Opposed? Well, looks like
That was
unanimous.
unanimous. Thank you, sir. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next up, Wednesdays on Main.
Filling in for Paula is Mary. I believe she filled in last year as well.
I filled in last year and I'm the volunteer assistant to Paula Key, as we refer to it, Paula Key's assistant. Like executive assistant, so. This is her request for this summer and early fall.
So she's asking for $5,000. Typically Paula gets what she asked for, she gets about half of that also in donations as well at the door. Usually her items are suggested donation and she does very well. So that you're aware, she's also applied for a grant through Maine Community Foundation for a Wednesdays on Main Plus. This would not go towards Wednesdays on Main Plus, but she's looking to do even more with items up at the DPAC, a holiday choral thing, so
It's a wonderful program.
It is.
it's great.
Absolutely wonderful. Can I have a motion regarding this, please?
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
There you go.
Okay.
Try to get you.
All those in favor? Thank you.
On behalf of my boss, thank you.
And last but certainly not least is the village, and that's Emily Fitzgerald. And she's asking for $1,520 for GoSport. GoSport used to be handled by the Chamber of Commerce. Then there was, of course, we went through the pandemic, so there was none. And then Bucksport Bay Business Coalition tried to do Ghoulsport. And then the village, in partnership with Leslie, took on GoSport again. It's been highly successful. Matter of fact, this committee recommended funding a magician this past year. And the request is the magician and the movie, which they do, and both are extremely well attended.
How did he do, Emily? Did he miss it?
Good.
Anything else to add?
No, if you don't have any questions.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Can we have a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? Congratulations.
Okay, and these are recommendations, just like with Panquist, the recommendation from this committee is to approve your request. So you will still have to come to the council in,
April, I've got it in my calendar.
it was either April or May, but you'll get those dates.
You will get an email,
Yeah.
yeah, but I can, let's see. I can- Sorry, don't wait on me yet.
So, all right, discussions of items not on the agenda for the committee or anything from the public. Okay, moving on. Looks like the next, schedule for the next meeting will be April 14th at 6 PM again. And have a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, in that case, all those in favor? Thank you for coming tonight. You will be around for the council meeting. I have a lot of notes on Ken Gorst, but
Yeah,